Hey guys, welcome back to another live video. Well, I say live video. I always say this, it's live. It's recorded live, but it's not going out live. So don't think that you can comment and I'm going to be able to read it right now. I will read it, but at a later date. Guys, what's going on? It's another podcast, another video, and I'm joined by a really cool guest from all the way across the world in, I'm guessing, Australia. It's Orion Kelly from orionkelly.com. Also, YouTuber, influencer, all about autism and stuff. I'm super excited. Orion, do you want to give yourself a little bit of an intro to my audience? Tell us what you're all about.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Dan. You're one of the reasons why I'm doing this, to be honest with you, mate. When you Google search autism, when you get a late diagnosis, as an Aussie who was late diagnosed, and we can talk about that story, but just as a quick setup, I mean, you Google it and really your videos pop up. And you know, there's many different topics that come up from that too, which is the way, you know, I would have been diagnosed, which you'd class, you know, back in the day as like an Aspie, and now it's like autism. But like, you know, I'm like, we can talk about that because I think like,
sure.
what's the difference? You know, like it's like, well, aren't we about inclusion, not segregation? So like, who cares what you call it? But anyway,
exactly.
But yeah, so from my point of view, you know, you kind of inspired me to talk, and I have a background in radio, so undiagnosed. I've worked in commercial radio in Australia, so in Sydney and Perth and Melbourne and all over the shop. So this is kind of my thing. So I wanted to find a way where I could, I guess, kind of advocate for the gaps that I found in Australia for late diagnosed autistic people or autistic adults. But also it was really because I have a kid who's autistic. So that's why I kind of took it on. And I found that, you know, when you look online, there's not a lot of representation around the world, and I guess that's how, you know, that's how I kind of got to where I am, and with the podcast and YouTube stuff. And I mean, honestly, doing a live stream and having you pop in on it, mate, it was honestly that was the end of my live stream. I couldn't go on. It was so good. So thank you so much for doing it.
It's my pleasure.
I was really late where you are. It's like 11:03 p.m. and my kid's in the next room in Australia. So if I sound like I'm whispering, that's why. But man, I'm so stoked. I'm so stoked to
thank
talk
you so
to you,
much, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, dude, I appreciate it. And I mean, I've been following your stuff. Like what I do, I mean, you know, if you're an entrepreneur in a niche like autism, like bizarre niche, right? Then you have to follow everybody, all the new guys that come up, everyone's biting at your ankles. Like you have to follow all the newbies, and you were like coming up on my feed. I'm like, I've got to check this guy out. So I've been following you for ages, and she started watching your videos, and then so I caught you on a live, and I was like, oh, I gotta say hello. So I just like darted in. I'm like, what's up, bro? And you're like, ah.
It was amazing. Good. It was great.
Oh man,
it was really cool.
My pleasure, and it's a pleasure to have you on the show because, like, you know, I've watched your videos, so it's like nice to kind of finally connect. But that's super dope. You touched on quite a few points then. You know, first of all, late diagnosis. You know, for an adult having a late diagnosis, it sucks because there's like zero help available. And Australia is even worse. I did a data mine with my audience. So me and my team made a big kind of data drill, and we got feedback from the audience, thousands of responses. And one of the biggest responses was that in Canada, there's little to no connection between the people who need the support and the supporters. So I'm putting on an event in Canada called Autism Social Summit, where it's a networking event, also like a live kind of like talks and groups and stuff. I'm going to be there. I'm going to connect the autistic people with the services in Canada. And I'm going to do the same in Australia. So Canada's the dry run, and then Australia is going to be the second one, or like the main run. So that's not until next year, but still something that's going to happen. Tell me about it. Like, what's it like being diagnosed autistic in Australia?
Yeah, great question, because there's a couple of things, right? I mean, I was diagnosed late. Why? How? That's what people always ask. Yeah, you're married, you have kids. Like, what's the point? What's the reason? And I always say, you know, look, but for having a kid, I may have never been diagnosed. And a lot of times, like, it sounds dramatic, but autism saved my life. Like, I think I'd just be dead because life was too hard. Like, I didn't fit in. No one understood me. You know, you everything seems to go wrong for you. Relationships, jobs, friends. You just don't connect, right? And and when you have a son and you're going through the diagnostic process, you obviously got to sit down with your wife and fill out these forms, right? But we're looking at each other going, hey, this is me too, kind of thing. And it's became like a two people for the price of one diagnosis. But you know, the diagnosis story is interesting because I can kind of look at it from the point of view of I'm a dad of an autistic kid, and I'm also an autistic parent. So in Australia, it's really interesting. It's probably very similar to the UK with regards to our healthcare system, right? It's, like the NHS, but
Nationalized,
in
right?
Australia,
Yeah.
in Australia, it's very much a free service. I mean, there's, they bulk bill you, you pay the gap, whatever. So there are resources, and there is a thing called the National Disability Insurance Scheme, which is basically for anyone with a disability, medically recognized disability, you can apply for support. So the issue with that is you pretty much have to prove you're autistic every 12 months. You pretty much have to reprove you're autistic as if why wasn't it cured? So I think that's one of the main issues with being diagnosed late is you almost get aged out. They're like, here's your paperwork, you are, see ya, catch you later, right? As opposed to kids, it's like, we better intervene, we better do early intervention therapy, which to me sounds like, are they an alcoholic? What are we, is this an intervention? And there's a lot of challenges in that. Does that make sense? It's like it's a 100%. Minefield, and you feel don't adults just get the hard end of the stick? I reckon a lot of late diagnosed adults, and then look, there's clearly more being talked about these days, but I think maybe because we feel more open to share it. But it's almost like there's kind of like this initial phase, and then after that you realize I'm still alone. Like I'm out. I'm out of the closet, so to speak, but I'm still alone.
Nothing's changed. Yeah. Like people know, but nothing's changed.
Or they know that, okay, that's cool. I'll accept that, but don't think I'm going to treat you any differently. Like
my dad said this to me. My dad said this to me when I got my diagnosis. My fucking dad said it to me. So I was like, and it's crazy, isn't it? Like, don't expect anything different. It's like, but isn't that the opposite? Like, if you turn around and be like, "Oh, I've been diagnosed with dementia," you wouldn't expect someone to be like, "I'm sorry, I'm not going to treat you differently." Of course you wouldn't. You'd have to adapt. You'd adapt to make the life easier, right? Because, and my parents said to me like, "Oh, we noticed you weren't the happiest child growing up." I was like, well, like, dude,
yeah, exactly.
I feel you.
And I feel for parents though, like obviously I'm a parent of an autistic kid. We got it quite early, but I also feel, I think, you know what, my parents, like I'm annoyed, but they did the best they could, and like the times have changed and people know things. Sometimes people don't know things. And it's, you kind of, I get grumpy and upset. Like, why did I have to wait until I was an adult to get diagnosed? It's kind of like the life I could have had, the chances I could have had. You kind of, and I sometimes I feel like telling other, because it's like, like you, people will kind of reach out and they'll share their story. And it's kind of like, you know what, you've actually got to mourn the life you lost. When you get a diagnosis, you've got to mourn. It's like, okay, now I know I'm not broken or a bad person. And, I am just different. I have a different brain. I have a medically diagnosed disability condition, whatever you want to call it. But the point is, that's actually a difference between I'm just a bad person who's broken, but then you've got to mourn the fact that you'll never be that normal person you're masking and trying to be all your life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you want to become your true self, right? Rather than this like a shell of a person that you were. And it's really interesting because you become more of it's like self-awareness, right? You become more of yourself, you become more self-aware, and things do change, but people will judge you for that change.
Yes.
And it's weird. It's like, no, dude, like, and I always say to people, they ask me this question, like, what do I do if my friends don't? Obviously, look, if they don't support you, they ain't real friends. So just snip, snip, snip.
Exactly.
You just cut them out, man. Like you surround yourself, because we are the sum of the 5 people we spend our most time with. If you just hang around with losers who don't even care about you, don't, you know what I mean? Like
100%. And that's exactly my experience. And, with regards to that premise, I actually got a lot of, in the first kind of 5 years or so, I don't know if you experienced it when you can remember back, but it was like, you're way more autistic since the diagnosis. It's you're like, you never used to be like, and it's kind of like, well, hang on, maybe that's because I finally realized who I really am and why I'm like this. And as a result, I've been able to invest my time in learning more about this and realizing I was camouflaging and suppressing and masking and trying to fit in, but still failing. Yeah. And when you stop doing that, it definitely feels amazing and it takes a load off. But in saying that, you almost feel like there's this endless battle of hitting the wall of people that kind of, they still try to compare your behavior to behavior in the past when it wasn't something that was you. It wasn't the real you. It was me trying to be you. With that old saying, like, I'm not who I am. I'm who you think I am, or whatever it is,
It's true.
Do you know what I mean?
It reminds me of, Like, if someone's homosexual or, gay or whatever, and then they come out the closet and they say, look, this is who I am. I'm a gay man, and this is my boyfriend, Tim, or whatever. I'm like, okay, great. Nobody says, hey, you weren't gay when you were dating girls in high school. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Like, it's the same thing. It's like,
exactly.
you're not a different person. You just like, you were just hiding in the shadows before, and you were just like not being who you wanted to be. You were just going wrong with the social norm because like you were trying to fit in, and like, and that's what it's
Yeah,
like.
and it's not a stereotypical disability. So let me explain what I mean. Okay, so whether you're gay or you're autistic or you have ADHD or whatever, right? This is something that it's not invisible, but it's hidden. Okay, now for example, if I had a car crash, let's say I had a car crash, and I lost the ability to use my legs, I now need to use a wheelchair. My dad, let's say your dad, is not going to say, I'm not going to treat you any differently. So you're going to need to walk up the stairs, mate. Your bedroom's
Yeah,
upstairs.
exactly. Yeah,
You get up the stairs, champ. Now your dad would never do that. He'd make the adjustment and go, okay, as of this diagnosis, your
what can I do
abilities
to
have
help?
changed. You
Yeah.
have a diagnosed disability. We're going to get a lift put on the stairs, or we're going to move your bedroom downstairs or whatever. But with autism, it's very different. It's like the wheelchair analogy is like a given analogy. No one fights that. It's like, oh, Jim's starting work tomorrow. Well, don't worry, we've already got a ramp and it's all safe and secure
Yeah,
for him.
exactly. Yeah.
It's a given. But if Orion's starting work tomorrow and I'm
Oh,
autistic, it's like, what do we do?
yeah.
Nothing.
Nothing. Yeah, it's a
So
burden now. It
and
looks like Orion's P45 is coming in the mail, and he's now get out. It's true. Like work dries up when you present autism because it's a problem. It's a problem that you had. And do you know what's really nuts, dude? Like I've worked in different types of TV shows and stuff like that. And one of the TV shows I was supposed to be on, it was a Netflix show called The Circle, right? And I was playing number one right up until go day, and I went into hiding. I had like it was like 2 or 3 days before I was going on the TV because it's kind of like what they call it, like a reality thing, right? And
yep, yep.
then the producers phoned me. They said, "Oh, the executive casting producers from the channel, not the production company, the channel, said that they wanted to play it safe, so they're dropping you from the show or the cast." I was like, "What?" Because they were too scared to have somebody on the show representing autism and how they would have treated me. The channel didn't want to feel bad for that, but that's doing nothing. It's kind of like it's like that is like that. It's like the job thing. It's like saying like, yeah,
Yep.
Ryan, you can start tomorrow. Oh, by the way, I'm autistic. Oh, so leave it with us. We'll get back to you. We got your
Yeah,
CV.
yeah. No, well,
It's like
it is. It is. I mean, and this honestly, this comes back down to representation, but also it comes down to honest representation. Like we can all get huffy and puffy about things that offend us, whether it's, I don't know, like Sia's movie or like reality TV and all this kind of things, and we can all complain about this kind of stuff, and we should, because the representation is not right. But we also can't pick and choose. For example, as an autistic person, I'm not perfect, right? I can treat people badly. I can be really nice and loving, and I can be very cold, right? Because
course,
I'm not only am I
just a
human, but
human.
I've got a different brain, right? So we need to see, like yourself, real autistic people on screen, but being real autistic people. And I think, this is a great example of what I'm talking about with regards to representation. So the only Emmy that Love on the Spectrum USA won was for best editing. Now, everyone stop and let that sink in. Okay. Like this is a show about autistic people finding love. And we're not going to get into a big rant about this, but but anyway, the only award it got was best editing. Now, this shows how but it's called a documentary. Well, it seems like reality TV to me, but another argument, Dan. I won't pull you into this one. This is my fight. But I guess the
No, it's
point I'm
fine.
making is we need unedited. We need real moments. We need, like yourself on that
Yeah,
show, being
raw
yourself. Hey,
autistic
what if something
stuff.
goes bad? Good, good.
Yeah, we need to
And
document it.
also,
Yeah, yeah.
this also comes down to our community. We want inclusion. Yeah, we want acceptance and understanding and inclusion. But our community can be
It's
some
so
of the
divided.
worst people with
Yeah,
regards to like what? Let's assume there's a percentage of the community that want to hammer you because you still use a term they don't like. Well, who
yeah,
cares if
yeah,
you don't like the term? I get to use what I want to use. Dan gets to use what he wants to use. And
yeah.
by the
Exactly.
way, does it actually matter? Like, does it actually matter?
No.
Either way, you still agree you're part of the spectrum.
Yeah,
Whether you want to call it
exactly.
Aspie or autistic or whatever,
Or
you're not
ND
saying
or
you're not autistic. You're not saying you're not on the spectrum. It's like, Jesus, guys, like, do we
just back
like
off? Yeah.
seriously? I get
Yeah,
so fired
it's
up
that
by
whole.
this.
Yeah, dude. I am so like, and I'm sorry, I swear like a mother trucker. Like, I am so fucked off by this whole thing. And the thing is, like, I put a poster. Do you see the post I put on Instagram? I put it
Yeah,
everywhere
yeah,
actually
yeah,
the other day. Yeah, and because like, you know, the amount of like, okay, this is what really pisses me off. The National Autistic Society, which is kind of like the gold standard here in the UK for autism charities, they're great. They really are good. But one thing that really fucks me off about them is that they have a whole training course or procedure all about the right terminology and language to use. You know, it's not a person.
yeah.
It's not. It's a person, an autistic person, not a person with autism or who has autism, right? And I was like, okay, hold on. Let's cut through the shit cake here. Why don't we just spend our money helping autistic people than fucking talking about stuff that doesn't
Yeah.
matter? Who cares?
Yes.
You could call it like Umbongo. Nobody cares. Like, it doesn't matter
Yes.
what the name is. What matters is how do you help that person? Like, seriously, the
Yes.
amount of money, and it's thousands of pounds. You know what I mean? It's like thousands of pounds. Like the research, the development, the staff, the fucking electricity to create that presentation. It's like, come on, guys,
Yeah.
pull your head out your ass. But you know what it is? And I think it's the product of a bored society. Now we are the current middle class of history. We got no. Well, we're now facing kind of crazy pressures. You know, like food shortages and the Russian Ukraine thing and all this kind of crap. And we had coronavirus. But before then, we had nothing. We had like 9/11. Yeah, okay, but where are we? Like, we had nothing. And it's kind of
Yeah.
like, what do we do? Too many people sitting around. The devil makes work for idle hands. So you got a bunch of people hanging out, just saying
Yeah.
shit like, hey, you know, we need to get rid of the name Aspie because, you know, fucking he was a prisoner of war and worked with the Nazis. Like, who gives a shit? Like, you know, you're gonna stop drinking
Yeah.
like Fanta and Siemens and VW. Like, no, you idiots. Like, it's
No.
nuts.
No.
And it's a cause for persecution.
Well, and this is the thing, right? So my issue is a lot of these organizations, and certainly the same in Australia, they're not only the boards, but not only the upper management, but a lot of the positions in these organizations are held by neurotypical people. Now, so we've got neurotypical people running organizations designed to serve autistic people, telling autistic people how to talk and act. So already that is utterly, it's fanciful, it's ridiculous. And if the government, be that the British or the Australian, are going to fund these organizations, give them taxpayer money to service the autistic community, they better have autistic people actually making decisions, not just taking it. And the idea that we would, and you're right, this is all about service delivery. The idea we would waste time and money and resources in fighting people about what to and what not to say is forget about saying that's silly. It's actually sad because there are kids who need this service. There are parents, there are carers. People need these services. And to be frank with you, I have videos where I have opinions on different things, but at no stage do I ever not followed up by going, but you know what? Your choice is your choice. Do what's right for you. Because from my point of view, man, you and I, right, we might be pretty well off in the countries we live in. But let's be clear, in 2023, there can be young people in some countries on the planet who could be diagnosed with autism, and their family, their herd, their tribe, their community, you know, may cure them by doing things to them that are not only something you never want to have in your mind, but also are deadly. Right. So, you know, we don't live in a fantasy world. Some countries, you don't get to choose what you call it or how you refer to it. To preach to me that everyone must say, like, if it's going to work for these kids to never say it, or it's going to work for someone to say they have autism and that will stop them from getting beaten up. I mean, this is actually what it's about. It's about the community and the services and not the bloody names and the words. And why do we have to make an argument based on one thing? Like, there's no such thing as an argument based on one thing. You can't just go, oh, Germans, Nazis, what are you doing, Dan? Like, that's not an argument. That isn't an argument.
No, it's not.
It's a diagnosis that you got from a medical healthcare professional who went to uni and became one and diagnosed you with that and called it that and gave you the paperwork with that on it.
Exactly. And that's the thing. Yeah, it fucks me off. And they're trying to change the whole narrative. It's not just a person, you know, it's not just like, oh, person with autism or Asperger's or whatever. It's also a whole thing where they say, oh, they're changing the way that it's. So they say, oh, it's neurodivergent person, right? All this kind of shit, and then they'll say things like stim dancing, right? Like, what the fuck is that? Like, stimming, self-stimulatory behavior is something that happens involuntarily, right? So it's something that happens out of anxiousness or nervousness or happiness or excitement, right? And it happens. Yes, you can fidget with things and have fun fidgeting with things, which is kind of stimming. But at the end of the day, it's involuntary. So when someone says, oh, I'm stim dancing, it's like, no, you're not. You're just trying to express your feelings through dancing. That's not stimming. Stop changing the goalpost. Stop creating something that isn't. You know what I mean? And it really bugs me. Because like there's like you said, there's people who spent thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars going to school to learn things about the brain with scientists who realize what's going on, who then say, this is what it is, and this is how it works, because they study this stuff day and day out. And then you got Joe Bloggs from down the street with like purple hair saying, hey, no, it's not it. It's like, dude, come on. You know what I mean? It's that's sad. The problem, isn't it?
Sad. That is the problem, because the thing is, why couldn't we just say that dancing? Why is Orion dancing funny? Oh, he's autistic, and sometimes he just dances funny.
Yeah,
maybe he's expressing himself. Maybe he's regulating himself. You know, I don't know. Maybe he's got some energy. It's like, why does everything need a label? Like I'm a massive stimmer, but I don't think I've found a stimming tool or toy on the planet that works better than basically, I don't know, picking the skin of my own skin off my nail. I know it sounds horrific, but like, that's all I've been doing down here. My thumbs have got no skin on them. I'm playing what I don't realize I'm doing it till like, oh, I'm bleeding. I'm doing it. I'm like, crap. How am I bleeding?
Yeah, exactly.
So I've been stimming with my own hands. So you know, I think when you start to put all these labels on things. And are they really coming from autistic people? Do you think, these labels, or do you think they're being pushed on them by their parents, their carers, the community? Because this is a big issue for me, and I really feel for autistic people that are almost brainwashed from the start.
Yes, you know, there's a great example. You know, it's really interesting. I think it comes from, and this is my personal opinion on it, but I don't know, right? Yeah, everyone's you know, has their own opinions of things, and they're entitled to that. That's fine. My opinion is this. There are a group of people who are self-diagnosed autistic individuals who may have ADHD and personality disorders, but probably are not autistic, right? But they want to feel included in that. So they don't get the official diagnosis because they know that it's going to be negative. So instead of going to the norm and getting a diagnosis and having an official terminology, they'll change it to bend it to they're like almost narcissistic in a way. They'll change it to their need. Now, what happens is they shout the loudest. So a lot of people listen and don't want to offend anybody, because we live in a society where people don't offend anybody. You know, you want to use the right pronouns and all this stuff. It's like, you know, there's so many things to remember. And, you know, so what you have is peer pressure. There's I think he's Australian or New Zealand. I can't tell. There's a guy who's Inside Asperger's. He used to have a channel called Inside Asperger's, but he changed the name to Inside Autism. It's like
Paul. Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, Paul. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, Paul with a beard. It's like he changed his name. Like, dude, Christ! Like, he built his entire brand on the term Asperger's, and there's nothing wrong with that.
But so did Chloe. So did Chloe.
Oh no, well, Chloe. So I know Chloe.
She did. Princess Aspian got changed, yes, right?
She did.
So she was Princess Aspian.
She was, but there was a reason Chloe changed hers. So I'm really good friends with Chloe. I've known her for many years. I've known Chloe since she started on YouTube, and we've been friends ever since. I'm trying to do a collab. Now, Chloe is an actor, and actors use their names. So she had to come away from a brand.
Yeah.
And so I get that. Yeah. But she also does push this bizarre narrative a little bit that, like, because look, we don't see eye to eye with everything. I'm sure there's stuff that you do that I don't see eye to eye with, right?
I know, but I think Chloe's great, Paul's great, you know, you're great. I'm not saying anything's wrong, but it's interesting that actually it isn't a one-off thing. No, you know, you're almost going to be one out, right? You're going to be. Yeah, and that just means, from my point of view, you know, because I studied law at uni and stuff, from my point of view, that's like, well, if you're the only person on the market, then there's no other competitors. And like, these people have taken themselves out of your competition pretty much. Like, you know, anyone who relates remotely to anything that is different to the one narrative is coming to you, and that's strange to me. And
it does, bonkers, man.
And this is the thing. Let's assume. So I want to say something as an assumption. Let's assume that most late diagnosed adults, because they probably have got married and had kids, not all, but let's assume most who had functioning careers are probably Aspies. And I mean in the olden style of looking at it, right? They're not, because that's what it would have been. And if you were assuming that, there's a lot of people that have a seat at this discussion, but probably have been so badly frightened by
they're
even mentioning
bullied.
it.
Yeah.
They don't ever want to mention it. And I think with regards to your self-diagnosis argument, that's a really interesting point. I agree with what you were saying. The only thing I would say would be I slightly disagree with is there are a proportion of people in some countries where it simply comes down to the waiting list and the money. They don't have the means, the financial means or the time to get the diagnosis. But I do agree that there, other people just take it upon themselves. I mean, for me, it was like hours and hours and sessions with a professor of psychiatry who specialized in the area to be diagnosed. So it wasn't like, a fun day in the park, but I thought it was important and necessary. But again, I think that can be not an option for everyone with the waiting list and the money. I think America can be very expensive. I'm not sure what you've heard about with regards to that kind of stuff, but
yeah, America's ridiculously expensive. So in the UK, if you're on a waiting list for a diagnosis in the UK, you're looking at a 2.5-year waiting list on the National Health System. If you paid for that, you're looking at $1,500 to $3,000 privately, and that's still a 20-week waiting list. In the US, it's like $5,000, and there's no real waiting list there because you
can see why people self-diagnose, right?
Of course, but I think that, and it brings that question, is self-diagnosis a valid diagnosis? And I'm like, you can self-identify as something and say like, okay, like I think I identify or align with these things, but until you actually have it officially written on paper and you've actually been through a clinical assessment, you can't really dictate that what you say is gospel to the word of what it potentially could be, because you don't know. It's like,
you're not a doctor or a psychiatrist.
Exactly.
Or
it's like, when you're like, when you're sick and you go on Googling something like my symptoms, it's always like, you're either pregnant or you got cancer, right? But it's like, you go to the doctor and they're like, oh, no, it's a viral. Here's some drugs, go home and you'll be fine in 3 days. You know what I mean? And so they're self-diagnosing as autistic, right? And it's like, but then they're poisoning the idea of the community by pushing in kind of rhetoric and dialogue that is completely just obliterating that kind of community aspect. And there's something else, and this is a question. I don't know the answer to this, and I'd love to put this out there. There's this whole thing about autistic characters on TV should be played by autistic actors, right? And there's this whole thing about it. Now, I get why people ask that question. I get it. But there's a huge but here. In Ghostbusters, written by Dan Aykroyd and Hal Ramis, Dan Aykroyd, a guy who has a diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome and Tourette's, plays a non-autistic guy. So you have an autistic man playing a non-autistic man character. So if only autistic people are allowed to play autistic characters, should that mean that only neurotypical people are allowed to play neurotypical characters? How is this? What is the answer to that? I don't know the answer, because the community says.
So potentially the answer is exactly what you've just said. And that sounds confusing. What I mean is, if there's a role for someone who has a disability of some kind, and you have that disability, you can probably play that role. But if there's also a role for someone who isn't disabled in any way, and it's just a standard made-up person, and not a real human, a made-up standard character, and you can play that role even though you have some sort of disability, well, then what's the difference between you and someone else playing it, given it's just a made-up character who's not disabled? Exactly. I think, but the reverse is different, right? So, and this is a tough question. Creed, the movie Creed, Rocky. I'm a massive Rocky fan. I love Rocky and Creed. I'm kind of sad for Rocky, because the producers kind of stuffed him around. Anyway, Michael B. Jordan, who plays Creed, said he only ever wants to read scripts written for white men. Now, what he's saying is, he doesn't believe he should be typecast into what he would class as, black men of colored roles. Now, I totally dig that. I respect that. I
get it.
Because when you think about it, when you write a lead role, people just assume most times, it's a white dude. The Hollywood blockbuster. But like Michael B. Jordan, he's one of the coolest dudes on the planet. The dude's ripped. But he actually, I heard him say that. And when you think about it, this is the end. But it's like, okay, Michael, that's cool. But then does that mean that, can I say to you, Michael, can I only apply for roles of black men? Now he's going to say, no, don't be stupid. That's racist. Yeah. Okay, so that's where this argument gets really messy.
Interesting.
So hang on, you're saying you only want to. Do you see what I'm saying? How this become messy, and it isn't an argument that I can answer. And I did get a bit huffy and puffy with the seer thing, but I guess the point is,
I did
guess the
too,
point
but
is, yeah,
I felt a certain
yeah,
way
yeah.
about it.
Straight actors can play gay actors, right? Like, didn't
Yeah.
Tom Hanks get an Oscar or something?
Oh,
And there's many others throughout
yeah,
time.
Jake Gyllenhaal, right? Jake Gyllenhaal's a straight
And
guy, but he was
Matthew
playing.
McConaughey, Tom
Yeah,
Hanks in Philadelphia. Didn't he have AIDS or something? And it was
yeah,
like a
he did. He have
really,
AIDS. Yeah,
they had,
yeah,
and
yeah. He was like,
Denzel was like his straight lawyer, and they had a yeah. But so I think there's many things through the time where it's possible. But I think what we're saying is, okay, yeah, sure, but everything is possible in its time. But as
yeah,
society changes and things
it
evolve,
evolves.
things change. So the idea is, if there's a, like, for example, do you think someone could have done Chloe's role better on Heartbreak High than Chloe?
No, I don't think so.
So this is the question. But
Yeah,
then if she
but
wasn't given that opportunity, would other actors who are autistic get a look in? Has she helped them? And therefore that's going to show there's more out there. Like, I went
yeah,
to acting school, like the proper legit acting school in Melbourne you have to audition for.
yeah,
But I've never had a role in my life. Never got past an audition because I'm
yeah,
shit at
yeah,
auditions. But I'm a good actor because
yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah,
autistic.
yeah. Exactly,
Job
exactly,
interviews.
exactly.
But
Yeah,
isn't that, what do you think? Do you think that anyone can play autistic characters, or?
I don't. I don't know. I mean, look, I worked with Netflix on Atypical, right? And the guy who plays Sam in Atypical is not an autistic guy, but he plays quite a cool Asperger kind of character, right? A guy who typically would have Asperger's syndrome, and he
I
does it
liked
really
it. I
well.
liked the show. I liked what he did. I mean,
I
I from a
yeah.
general point of view, I thought it was kind of cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's same. And like, I came in on the show right after they'd filmed, they just finished filming season 1. So I had to watch like the raw edits of it. And then I had to kind of say to them, like, look, guys, this, and this. And so you didn't see my input coming until like season 2 and 3, but you'll see there's a change in Sam since season 1 to 2. If you rewatch it, you'll be like,
I
right.
can totally
Yeah,
respect that. I've watched all seasons, and
yeah,
I was more huffy puffy in the first. That's really
yeah,
interesting. I didn't know that story. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So anyway, after that, I think he did a great job. But then again, the Sia thing, I was super triggered by it because I think it's because, and this is what it is. It's a technical term, but I think like when you see the guy play Sam, we only have seen him ever play Sam because he's kind of a
yeah,
nobody actor, right? But the Ziegler, Maddie Ziegler, who's
yeah,
part of Sia's entourage, I'd seen her play other roles, and we know for a fact that she is this opposite of autistic girl. She's this kind of like
yeah.
super upbeat, outgoing, social kind of like girly girl. So for her to go in and pretend to be autistic was almost insulting, I think, and that's how it felt.
It was.
It was like it was
It was.
uncomfortable.
It
I
was.
couldn't. It was
Yeah.
very uncomfortable to watch. And not only that, I mean, the Sia thing, there was loads of other bits in there. It wasn't just the autism thing. It was like standing
Yeah,
on
the
her to like
restraint
get
stuff
it.
and all that kind of. But yeah, but it's a caricature. It was a
Yeah,
caricature of an autistic person, but not even a real one. It
yeah,
was, yeah. So
yeah. It was like,
it was like blatantly offensive in a way, where they didn't even get that it was offensive. And I think
yeah,
that's the issue.
that's the big, yeah. But we're running out of time as well. We have like 4 minutes left. But still, but really quickly, I think some people can play non-autistic people can play some autistic characters really well. Like there's a film called Adam. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It's great. But I think that there is sometimes where it has to be like, like Chloe's role. She had to have done that. Like there was no other way around
Yeah.
it. And I think like it was spot on. And I spoke like, I spoke to her, like I know everything. Like I said, I'm really good friends with Chloe. I think she's great. I think what she does is fantastic, and how she's done it is really, really clever. But she's always pro acting first, and then it was like kind of awesome advocacy second. So it's really interesting, because she comes through and she's definitely done what you said. She's opened the door now for people to be autistic and be great actors for autistic roles because it allows us to be a bit more genuine, right? And I think that's a great thing, but as well, I do think that some non-autistic people can play autistic characters really well,
Well, you're taught
So
in acting school how to build a character, right? You're taught how to build a character. You do your research, then you work out what you're going to take. Sometimes you meet with people, and you kind of, So I mean, this is the argument, Dan, that'll never end, because it's like, well, hang on. If I went to acting school to learn to act, I can play anyone. But then you're telling me I can't play this person because there's a person who is that person, and then it becomes really confusing. And it's like, well, if that's the case, then let's fire the actors and get the real people in biopics to play themselves. That doesn't make any sense. So that's where it becomes troubling, I think. And it's one of those arguments you can never really get to the bottom of, unfortunately. But I think we've got to give people, I mean, let's make it genuine and authentic. If we can have authentic performances, then let's have them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, the thing is, like, I don't think you can really answer that question. I think it's something that just has to happen. I think that sometimes
Case
it's
by
right,
case,
sometimes
yeah.
it's wrong, and it's case by case, yeah, because it's individual, and all autistic people are individual as well. You may do a film based on Kim Peek, and Kim Peek happens to be a savant, right? So you might have to have somebody, because you can't have a savant actor as heavily disabled as Kim Peek playing himself, because they're maybe unable to do that. You know what I mean? So there's so many different things you have to take into consideration when you're dealing with disabilities and portraying actors. But I think it's a fascinating topic, and I want to open it to the public to kind of chime in. But dude, I'm running out of time. Zoom's going to cut me off. Saying that though, I just want the very best for autistic people, and I want all support available for everyone. That's it. That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
So, and I don't care if anyone wants to use with autism, has autism, autistic, neurodiverse, whatever you want to call it. I really don't care. So,
No.
that being said, Orion, where can people find you on the web? How do people get in contact with you if you want to find out more?
Well, yeah, and it's all about quality of life. I totally agree. Look, my website's orionkelly.com.au. So obviously you can check that out. And you've got my YouTube channel, Orion Kelly, that autistic guy, and I do podcasts, My Friend Autism, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, you can find me. If you don't find me, it's because you weren't meant to. So whatever. But I'm just cool to talk to Dan. Honestly, I couldn't care less. You can find me, you don't find me. It doesn't bother me in the slightest. I honestly couldn't care. I'm just happy to talk to Dan, man. I'm so cool. It's so good to connect with you, and hopefully we can do it again, because I don't know. Obviously, we
100%.
don't stop talking very often.
I'd love to do an Instagram live with you, dude. I'd love to have you on Instagram live. I think that'd be really.
Oh, yeah,
really
let's
cool.
do that. I'll do it, man. I'm stoked to talk to you whenever I can. So yeah, I will. If people
100%.
find me, they find me. If they don't, they don't. Whatever, man. It's all good.
Well, for anybody listening on the podcast and everybody who's watching, I am going to leave all the links for Ryan's stuff in the description down below. This includes anybody watching on TikTok and Instagram. So you guys will find him at the information I've leaving down below. But thank you so much, Ryan, for being a guest. It's been amazing. Yeah, stoked to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.